Welcome, everyone. This is Glacier Dialogue 3 from Risk to Resilience, and wishing everyone also a Happy New Year, Gudi Padwa, Ugadi, and everyone who is celebrating in their own regions. We'll start with playing a short video uh, showcasing, just to set the context. Let me share my screen. So, what you just watched is not a scene from a disaster film. It is the footage from our Himalayas, from our rivers, from communities that people in this room and across India live, depend on the food, water, energy, and life. So, good afternoon, everyone. This is Glacier Dialogue 3. I'm Anurag Malu, founder of the Voice of Glaciers Foundation, and today's dialogue is hosted as a UN side event for World Glacier Day 2026, co-organized with UNESCO and the World Meteorological Organization. Let me give you three numbers. 54,000. That is how many glaciers exist across the Hindu Kush Himalaya, the third pole, the largest concentration of ice on Earth outside the Arctic and Antarctic. 2 billion. That is how many people live downstream, drinking water that begins as glacier melt. The Ganga, the Brahmaputra, the Indus, the Mekong all begin here. And 200, that is the number of glacial lakes, over 200 plus, is the number of glacial lakes already identified as potentially dangerous, ticking clocks sitting above our valleys, our towns, and our people. So now here is the question that haunts me and should haunt all of us. We know which lakes are dangerous. We have the satellite data. We have the science. So why are communities still being caught off guard? Why are people still dying? That is the conversation we are here to have today. This is our third glacier dialogue, and we have assembled exactly the right people to answer that. Allow me to introduce our four panelists. Dr. Ashim Sattar is a glaciologist at IIT Bhubaneswar and founder of Cryosense Lab. He has dedicated his career to understanding how and when glacial lakes break and what that means for the hundreds of thousands of people living in their path. Dr. Ashim, welcome. Dr. Aparna Shukla. She is a scientist in hydrology and cryosphere division at the Ministry of Earth Sciences. She works at the critical intersection of cutting edge Himalayan research and national policy, asking not just what the science says, but how it actually reaches people. Dr. Aparna, welcome. Safi Ehsan Rizvi, sir. He brings 36 years of government experience as a former IPS civil servant, including as a senior advisor at NDMA. He has been inside the system, working on national risk and disaster risk. He's one of the most candid voices I know on where governance is working and where it is not. Rizvi, sir, welcome. And Anthony Joe Muthedan. He's a consultant in urban flood management with UNDP, working on hydrological risk modeling and how data scarce mountain environments can still build credible early warning systems. Anthony, welcome. So before we begin, a word on how we'll run this today's dialogue. We have struck 60 minutes of structured conversation across four rounds. Then we open the floor to all of you for 20 to 25 minutes. Please put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll get to as many as we can. So with that, let's begin with the round one. Understanding the changing risk landscapes. So people often ask, are things really getting worse? Or are we just paying more attention? Let me put that question directly to our glaciologist, Dr. Ashif. You model these systems. You have studied the lakes, the ice, the terrain. Give us the honest scientific picture. If the glaciers did not melt, we would not have, like we would have no Ganga, no Yamuna. So we need glaciers to melt, right? Just not like this. But right now, that same melt is killing people. How do we explain that paradox to communities whose water depends on the very thing that threatens them? Himalayan glaciers are losing mass faster than ever, with almost 200 plus lakes, already flagged as dangerous. From your modeling and field research, how is glacier risk fundamentally changing today compared to 2 or 3 decades ago? And are we entering an era of cascading hazards? One event triggers the next, where a rockfall triggers an avalanche, triggers a gulf, triggers a flood, all in one unstoppable chain. So over to you, Dr. Ashim.
Thank you, Anurag. Again, hi everyone, panelists, participants. My best wishes on the International Glacier Day to all of you. This is a very important day that we are celebrating, and thanks to the Voice of Glaciers for facilitating this. Anurag, a big thanks to you. And thank you, Anthony, Rizvi sir, Aparna ma'am, to share the thoughts together with me in this event today, and delegates from other countries and all over the world. My warm regards to all of you. And now I will come back to the question which Anurag has put. Uh, so I would like to start with, maybe kind of linking it to a very, very simple, topic that we use for in a day-to-day life. As a layman, we all have our bank accounts, right? So we have a current account, we have our saving accounts. So basically, what do? If we try to, be financially secure, we definitely rely on the savings account, and we don't have money. We just go back to the savings account, take out some money, and then, use that when we are in need. So, let us think of the same banking system into somewhere where this bank is nothing but the glaciers, which are storing money in the form of water. So if you see that these banks are functional, well, they have a good, savings account where they have enough water and they're melting. And then, what initially, if you see 2 or 3 decades back, this bank was functioning really well. Money was given out when it was needed. Now it's just imagine a situation where we were able to predict when we needed money, and when it was available to us. So in that sense, in the mountains, if we try to relate that concept, we see that these are storehouses of frozen water. And this is definitely the paradox you talked about is very important, in a way that, first of all, we cannot stop the glaciers to melt. They are in a natural process of melting. Now, the point is that how much extent it should melt, and is it in an accelerating mode? So if you look into the whole process of the Earth system science, we have a Milankovitch cycle, which is a natural cycle which we cannot stop. But that is leading to these glacial interglacial periods, which is leading to formation of glaciers, again, melting of glaciers. But these work in a longer time scales, geological time scales. But now we see these impacts, why do we see this as a paradox? We see that these are happening as a much more faster rate. These water towers, what we call today, are the glaciers up in the mountains, in the Himalaya or anywhere in the world. They are the banks of water. So what? The glaciers are melting, but how? Is it because it is melting too fast and it is making water availability? People are happy in the downstream that they have a lot of water now. But the point is that they are melting in a much faster rate, in which there is more availability of water currently in the valleys, but tomorrow there may be a situation where we can go into water security problems. So that is why we need to understand the balance between climate change and how glaciers are behaving. And this whole system, if it gets disturbed, if we look into another example, let us say, in agriculture, we normally use this drip irrigation, where constantly we get this, the vegetation gets the water. and then we are sure that the vegetation flourishes well. It needs to be a constant discharge of water to the river systems. It can be seasonal, of course. In winters and summers follows. Again, winters follows where we get more snowfall. But now what do we see that this whole system is now getting disturbed. When we try to compare the bigger cycles, now we come down to smaller time scales where we're looking into anthropogenic causes. Where we have smaller scales fluctuations in terms of water availability downstream. The point I would like to make out that before it was predictable, but today it's a dynamic situation. We're not able to predict what is going to happen to the glacier, when it is going to happen, when does the cascade happen, when does a glacial lake outburst happen, what are these all processes going on together. And if we look into the frequency magnitude relationship, we definitely see a change. Before we were more worried about isolated events. If you remember 2 or 3 decades back, we considered glacial lake outburst, flood, or an avalanche to be an isolated event. I mean, it comes and impacts the settlement, and then that is all. But today, what we are seeing that there is a shift in isolated events towards cascading, if rightly pointed out by you, Anurag, is that it's a domino effect that we have been really seeing. So this is because of the anthropogenic, or you may say that the pace at which climate change is happening is not only impacting the glaciers, but also the surrounding environments. Please feel free to stop me if I'm speaking more.
Yes.
So I'll just keep on going. So just stop me wherever you like. You just say stop. I'll just stop there. Correct. So second important thing I would like to make out is just to point out what we have witnessed in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
First is the Sikkim disaster, Dharali disaster, the Chamoli disaster.
Mhm.
Three big events in the world happening in the Himalayas has opened eyes where we have seen that how these events can be disastrous in a way that is unimaginable at this moment. And how do we see our future? And yes,
I
Anurag,
think
please go
no,
ahead.
I mean you already touched now on the, South Lonak, Sikkim disaster, Kedarnath, Chamoli disaster. So what does that the frequency of that, events tell us scientifically, and then what does it mean for how we plan ahead now?
Yes, so by looking into these disasters, we definitely do not have a particular trend. Scientific studies say that we do not have a trend of gloves, right? So far we do not have a trend of glove. But what we see in terms of magnitude, that the magnitude have gone up a lot, as what we've seen in Dharali and also in Chamoli as well as in South Lonar. What was it is that it kind of the water which was released from the lake was 50,000 million cubic meters of water, and the debris that it eroded as it came, the water propagated down, was in order of magnitudes higher. So now the point is, it is not just evaluating the lakes but also the valley. So we do not have any scientific technique that can predict such events, but also we have techniques that can tell us what can lead to cascades so that we prepare for that. So coming back to your paradox question, I would just end on one point saying that melting of glaciers is important because it definitely is the lifeline for all the people living in these river systems, Indus, Ganga, and Brahmaputra. But the question here, what we are worried about is, at what rate are they melting? And scientific studies have said that smaller glaciers are more sensitive to climate change compared to the bigger glaciers. So at one point of time, we would be losing all the smaller glaciers. What would be remaining to us is the bigger glaciers. Bigger glaciers, they hold a lot of volume of water, and they needs to be preserved in a way that we need to bring down the impact of climate change through artificial methods or through bringing down anthropogenic causes. With that, I think I should stop.
Thank
Otherwise, it
you.
will going
Thank
to
you,
be
Doctor.
another 2 hours. Thank you so much.
No, appreciate it. So with that, let's move to Dr. Aparna, more from the monitoring and governance lens. Satellite monitoring, of glaciers has improved significantly in the last 2 decades. Yet disasters like Kedarnath, Chamoli, Dharali, South Lonak showed how quickly compound risks, outpace institutions. How prepared are our national frameworks to deal with glacier hazards that are accelerating faster than our systems can adapt? And how can Himalayan research be designed to actually reach and benefit communities, not just scientific journals and papers, academic papers? So over to
Yeah.
you, Dr. Aparna.
Yes. So hello and namaste to all. Good afternoon, and my best wishes on the occasion of Gudi Parva and also starting of the new year for all of us, and also for the international, Day of Glaciers and Water Day also. So we have both, one after the other. So and also, this is my first intervention, so I'd like to actually thank and congratulate Anurag and his team at the Voice of Glaciers for aptly choosing this theme for this dialogue and for extending the opportunity for me to contribute to it. Thank you so much. And now coming back to your two intertwined questions, that you've asked. So, firstly, regarding the preparedness of our national frameworks, so I won't hesitate from saying that India's national frameworks for glacier hazards, particularly for GLOFs, are evolving, but remain kind of underprepared compared to the accelerating pace of the climate-driven risks. However, we know that the National Disaster Management Authority (NDMA) has launched several effective and very targeted programs. Which I'm sure that Rizvi sir, in his intervention, would elaborate upon. And the Ministry of Earth Sciences also closely works in cooperation with the NDMA, and there is a lot of scope for improvement, and we are constantly working and evolving towards the same. But what is more important to understand is that why is it difficult to catch up with the pace of these evolving hazards? It is essentially because there is there is still infrastructural, community, and science related gaps in our understanding, as Dr. Ashim has correctly pointed out in his intervention. That but however, I would like to emphasize and highlight one critical area, which is common to almost all the hazards, and it's extremely crucial as far as understanding mountain hazards is concerned, and that is the availability of reliable meteorological observations. Because that can give a wealth of insights into such events and the studies related to it. So, in this context, Ministry of Earth Sciences, under its recently launched mission MOSAM, has a lot of path changing interventions under this mission. And one of the most important ones is that we are planning to have increase the network of Doppler weather radars across the country, and essentially strengthen the meteorological monitoring network in Himalayan region, which would greatly shape up and benefit the overall national glacier hazard landscape. So now coming to the next part of your question, Anurag, that is how Himalayan research can benefit or will benefit the communities or can benefit the communities. So most importantly, we have to and we need to bear in our minds that and keep reiterating that the Himalayas are both a lifeline and home to the communities whose livelihoods and cultures depend on the fragile mountain ecosystems. And so the first step in aligning the research to local needs and national strategies, for example, local needs is that, like, national strategies, for example, like the National Mission for Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem (NIMSHE) of the Department of Science and Technology, which adopts a kind of a whole of a system approach, for addressing the major challenges by involving all possible stakeholders. So that kind of an approach we need to have, and our some of our programs they already have. And likewise, the Ministry of Earth Sciences, being a service ministry, we craft need based thematic call for research proposals, awarding extramural funding to the in hydrology and cryosphere domain. These include risk reduction in Himalayan region, where I think Dr. Ashim is part of, then urban flood management, then enhancing the network of benchmark glaciers across Himalayas for their studies. And as I speak, one of our collaborative intervention with the Switzerland, that is the Swiss National Foundation SNSF, is live. This call for proposal basically focuses on the mountain hazards. And if there are any researchers out there listening, so I request them to basically contribute to the same. So in this manner, we try to ensure that the gap between what is needed by the society and what we are doing at what research we are conducting, they kind of match together. Additionally, in this direction, I think some steps which can benefit are the kind of like integration of the traditional knowledge in the solutions we propose for these problems, and also building capacity and involving the local communities at every step. That is actually going to bring the real change, and also investing in the mountain mountain regions itself, in the mountain universities, field stations, so that they expertise and job remain in the region. So that is what I'd like to sum it.
Thank you. That's very, very welcoming. And yeah, thank you for sharing this. How are we basically bridging this gap that exists between science and then translating into the policy and actually eventually implementation from research to policy. So with that, let's move to, Dr. Rizvi sir here. The science is clear, sir. The hazards are mapped. Now the question becomes, what is the system doing with that knowledge, and where is the system really failing? You have spent 36 years inside the government, including at NDMA. You have seen disaster policy from the inside. And here I would like you to be really candid, because we know we have NDMA, SDMA, district administrator, all the early warning protocols, everything on paper, the governance architecture exists. And yet, communities are still caught off guard. Hotels continue to be built on old landslide fans in Dharali. Buildings rise on unstable ground in Joshima. Communities receive warnings they do not either understand or do not receive them at all, or sometimes they don't always reach the people who need them. So, where exactly is the system breaking down? And
Thank
why
you.
does disaster continue to receive so little political urgency compared to other national threats? So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anurag. Thank you for inviting me. And hello to all the participants, the ones who have been muted by Anurag and the ones who are not. So hello to all of you. So this is a very serious issue, but in a short, you said I should be candid, so I'll be very candid. To say that the science is ready, the assessments are ready, the research is ready, and the government is not ready is absolutely wrong. This is a candid assessment. The science is not ready, the research is not ready, the mitigation programs are not ready, the communities are not ready, the state governments, the local governments, everybody is not ready. But there has to be a beginning that has to be made, and the beginnings have been made, and they're very good beginnings. So if we start assuming that of the 5 or 6 silos that make up an entire ecosystem, 5 are ready and one poor fellow government which doesn't get a chance to come and respond all the time, because then everybody goes on and on that the government is doing nothing. Government, it's very easy to blame the government because it's not there to respond. It's not there on the call to respond, except Aparna ma'am, who is very happy that I'm taking her side right now. So the point here is that it is a combined effort of all of us, whether it's a scientist, an academic, a government officer, an officer who works in the Panchayat Raj, a person who makes that hotel, the person a mason who makes that hotel, and the person who decides not to heed a warning and continues to hang around even though when an alert has been sounded. This is the whole ecosystem. Now, in this ecosystem, what has Government of India done is something very important to see. So, Government of India as a whole, which includes a lot of elements of at least 5 or 6 ministries of Government of India and 6 state governments, and a lot of scientific institutions like ISRO, NRSC, Central Water Commission, the IMD, which is under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. All of these have NDMA. They've all got together and they started participating in an entity called the Committee on Disaster Risk Reduction, CODRR. So the CODRR created a separate segment for GLOFs. In that, all of us sat together. That's where I met Dr. Ashim Sattar. That's where I met Dr. Aparna Shukla. And Anthony was with me in NDMA, and both of us worked to co-create that entire platform. Now, what did we find? We found exactly what I just said, that nobody's ready. So what we did was we started researching and doing all the stuff that we could find as to where we are. To move somewhere, you first need to know where you are. As you scientists say, hazard assessment first, and then your final goal, and then how do you move to that goal? So in that, we created a fairly significant sized national GLOF mitigation program, which the government of India cleared and which is currently under action in the 4 states of Himachal, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are already putting their government money into their own programs, but the design has been given to them also. So what they did was they went to NRSC first, and they asked the question in this committee that how many lakes do you have? So we found that there are 7,500 lakes which are above 1 hectare each in surface area. So then this committee of ours, through various deliberations along with GSI, Central Water Commission, the Swiss Development Corporation, Dr. Ashin, and there are various other experts of this field. We consulted so many of them. And then it was NDMA, which along with everybody else through the SCODA platform, found those 200 lakes which were declared as at risk. Now, these are lakes that have been studied by scientists and by government institutions, private institutions, international institutions, and they've studied so many times because they know this lake is increasing in size for geospatial data. If you look at it in a temporal format, you know these lakes are increasing in size and at a much faster rate. Why are they increasing at a faster rate? Because the glacier behind them is melting at a faster rate. Hence, the water that is accumulating, leading to an eventual burst. If the natural dam that has, which is called a moraine dam, if that in itself breaks down, then the whole water comes crashing down. So something like the analogy that Dr. Sattar was giving about a bank. So there are some banks which are drying up and they just vanish. So all our reserves of water will vanish after some time, soon after some time. And there are some banks which become so unwieldy that they just blow up and all the money just flies off into space. So using the same analogy, that is how glaciers are currently positioned. So in this program, we worked on basically 5 things. How Government of India through NDMA and through all these institutions and ministries, they started pushing this knowledge down to the states. Each state was requested to take ownership and leadership. So NDMA started decaptaining itself. We call it the process of decaptainization. And we are not the captains, you are the captain. It is your state, it is your glacier, it is your lake. If a disaster happens, it's going to bother you. So the reins should be in your hands. So the state got the money from the Finance Commission funds, and they started taking ownership. So out of these 200 lakes, 40 lakes were visited over the summer of 2024 and the summer of 2025. As all of us know, it's very difficult to visit these lakes in winter time and spring time because they are totally frozen and the path up to them is very difficult. Most of them are 5,000 meters and above. So they were all visited and the 5 activities have been initiated. First is the hazard assessment, which you can do from the sky through satellites. Second is doing the same thing on the ground, which is much more micro and much more detailed. So that's where the science comes, hazard assessment. Number 2 is automated weather monitoring stations. So 2 have been placed on 2 lakes. A third one is right now as we speak in Himachal Pradesh is being placed. And every year 224455 will grow. So your automated monitoring on a 10-minute basis of every single at-risk lake in another 3, 4, 5 years will improve. That is your second activity. The third activity was early warning systems. So the moment a lake's water level goes up beyond a certain threshold, then there should be a system where it's all connected through satellite networks and which downstream communities immediately get an alert or something sounds which make people run up towards up the slope rather than near the river. And the fourth thing is mitigation plans. So these have been started. The first state to really start off is Sikkim. Dr. Ashim has also been involved with them. They're doing really involved things in the kind of mitigation plans that they are thinking of. We organize international conferences and connections with them so that we can get the best practices from all the world. And the fifth is your community question of capacity building. So you should be aware, you should not build exactly as you said in the Dharali case on a old fan, that kind of stuff. So that is the process that has been begun. We are still in a very tentative stage. We cannot say that victory has been won and everything is fine and let's go home. We should use a day like the Glacier Day to actually resolve and actually show what have we done in the past 1 year as a country. So that's where I'll stop for the moment.
Thank you, sir. That was very, very candid, and also sharing both the perspectives. Sometimes, as you rightly said, it's easy for us to blame the government for everything, not knowing their perspective also. So thank you. So the follow up here is basically, I remember when we had this conversation, and you mentioned like how a terrorism event that kills 50 people gets 200 times the coverage and resources of a disaster that kills thousands of people. How do we shift that political and then media language, the calculus around the glacier risk? What would it genuinely take to change that narrative?
So you're asking me again the question, or it's to
I
Dr.
mean,
Anthony?
it is truly just to how do we change, especially this narrative around media taking priority in talking this about the glacier related risks also. There is not really a media narrative around it. I
So,
only see.
yeah. So I've had experience on the security side also being an IPS officer and having worked in the security establishment and government of India. So I've seen that part of how government of India and the world functions, and I've seen this part of how the government of India and world
Yes.
functions. So it's somewhat historical that climate change wasn't that much of a bother prior to the year 2000. Prior to the year 2000, you had a lot of insurgencies and terrorist movements and secessionist movements all over the world. It was a time where economic growth had not filtered into a large number of non-rich countries. Slowly, economic growth has started coming. Maybe terrorism activity has come down. However, historically, the entire ecosystem to deal with national security issues grew and it grew and it grew. So every newspaper and every media house and every company that deals with news, they built a vertical to deal with just national security. So that vertical has been born, brought up, trained in national security, and then there are these agencies that work on national security. So there is an ecosystem within the media, which is the voice, which amplifies all that is done by the national security establishment. What I've realized is on the disaster management side, which is the climate adaptation side, there is a lot of work that is done, like in this IMD, Central Water Commission, National Remote Sensing Center. There are at least, like I counted once, about 25 Government of India organizations. I'm not even counting the ones that are associated with state governments or academic institutions like universities which have focus on disaster management. So there are so many more organizations doing research, development, and focused ground level work regards climate adaptation and disaster mitigation. However, that concomitant connectivity towards the media is not there. Because in the media, for possibly their entire ecosystem did not develop. And now what you have is maybe one journalist who handles the climate or disaster matter. Then within this, the climate people have a bit of an up. And climate, as we all know, for the last 20, 25 years, the whole focus globally, especially from the countries where all the money came for all the research through think tanks, was on climate mitigation. which means how do you reduce GHGs. However, climate adaptation, which has suddenly now started seeing a lot of work, just because Mr. Bill Gates made this statement that it is time to move from mitigation to adaptation, that's because all the big money must be now moving towards climate adaptation. So obviously, if a think tank has to do a project and they are not getting a project for climate mitigation, they're getting for adaptation, they will work on that. But the media side has definitely not developed. While we were in the civilian side of government on this side, we tried to bring everyone, we tried to be open, we tried to be transparent. And today, if I'm speaking with you most willingly, it is because I have this little evangelist feeling in me that I need to bring out the fact that in a disaster, we lose 8,000 people a year. But nobody really cries about them. Nobody says anything about them except those agencies that are focused on it, except for that occasional little news item. Everybody's forgotten about South Lonak now. Whereas if you have a terrorist incident in which two people also lose their lives, then it is spoken of for many days. So with that equivalence is important, not that you should reduce the focus on national security and increase it on disaster management security. All of them should grow together. That's my general point.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. So with that, let's move to Anthony here. Anthony, we all talk about how Himalayas supply fresh water to nearly 2 billion people, but still remain one of the least monitored mountain systems on the planet. We understand the terrain is brutal, the altitudes are extreme, the instruments fail, and yet we are being asked to make infrastructure decisions, where to build roads, bridges, settlements in exactly these environments. From a hydrological modeling perspective, how can basic scale risk assessments help us anticipate GLOF impacts before they happen, where data is so scarce and instruments rarely survive those difficult terrains? So over to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Anurag. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think it helps to start by reframing how we look at a GLOF. We often treat it as a glacial lake problem, but in reality, it is a river basin problem that begins in a glacial lake. And that shift in perspective is exactly where the basin scale hydrological modeling becomes very useful. Because once a lake breaches, the real story is not just about the source, it's how the flood wave moves downstream. So it's about how fast it travels, how it amplifies at the confluences, and who and what lies in its path, like settlements, bridges, hydropower projects, roads, or any linear distribution systems like the electricity lines or the gas distribution lines. So what it allows us to move from the hydrological modeling, what it allows us to move is from basically identifying a dangerous lake or classifying a dangerous lake to ask a much more practical question, as in, what if this lake fails? What happens next? Now, of course, the Himalayas are a data scare environment. We rarely know the exact trigger, as in, was it an avalanche? Was it a landslide? Was it a cloudburst? Or was it even a marine failure? And we are also very unsure about the type of failure. Is it an overtopping failure or a piping event, or is it a combination of both of them? So again, we have uncertainties on the bathymetry of the lake, the dimensions of the breach, or maybe the breach geometry. So the role of modeling in here is not precise prediction. It is more about credible scenario building. We can simulate different possibilities, as in what if it's a smaller breach or if it is a larger breach? What if it's a gradual release or it's a sudden outburst? Or if was it a wet flow during a monsoon or was it during the summer season? So it's more about creating a library where we have all of this what if scenario so that we do have a better understanding on what happens around. Now, when it comes to the modeling, the most essential parameters, apart from the land use, land cover, the digital elevation model, or the soil map, the other three most important parameters which we use for modeling are the volume of the lake, which can be derived from the bathymetry, then the breach width, and the last one will be the time of formation of the breach. Now, these three parameters are actually important in translating it to the peak flow, the peak discharge of a lake, which after the modeling outputs in the inundation area, the flood depth, velocity, and the most importantly, arrival time at the downstream. for decision makers, that's incredibly valuable, because preparedness is not just about certainty. It depends on having a reasonable understanding on what could happen. So I think basin scale modeling plays a very critical role here on bridging the gap between the science and governance. And right now, the glacial lake related risk is mostly known in the scientific terms of lake expansion theories, remote sensing datasets, or maybe the lake inventories, which should actually be converted into inundation maps, travel time estimates, and the exposure of key assets in the downstream. So instead of waiting for the perfect data from the field, I think it's very important to start modeling, having a wide array or wide range of the what if scenarios, have ranges where like what could go the maximum, or what could go the maximum extreme, or let's be more optimistic side on like what if there is a 20% of the flow from the lake. So it's what I understand is maybe modeling can actually bring in the concept of anticipating the consequences. So this allows the shift from the question of were the hazardous to what happens if it fails, and who needs to act. So I think that shift can actually prepare us for the glacial lake risks in general.
More anticipation.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. With that, let's move to the round three. I mean, I'm now looking at the time. So last year, in Gilgit-Baltistan, in the POK, a local shepherd noticed something unusual about a glacier lake above his valley. He did not have a satellite, he did not have a model, but he had decades of lived observation and holistic understanding of shifting weather patterns. And he raised the alarm in time. He alerted his village early, saving hundreds from a severe Gloff event. So, truly a hero. Meanwhile, millions were lost to corruption in Gloff projects in Gilgit-Baltistan POK. We are not from there, so we're not going detail there. But like that story tell us something important about where some of our most valuable data might actually be sitting. So, Dr. Ashim here, we know these so many dangerous glacier lakes, we are monitoring. Most of them sit in terrain that is, like as we discussed in the last question with Anthony, difficult to instrument, difficult to monitor through sensors, especially in harsh winters. Researchers can't visit there regularly. Yet local communities like shepherds and such farmers, monks in high altitude monasteries or villages, they have been observing these systems for generations. So they notice when a lake changes color, when anything is animals stop going to certain altitudes for pastures. Could this kind of local ecological, like indigenous traditional knowledge, how do we integrate this formally into glacier hazard modeling? And if so, what would that actually look like in practice? Have we seen it work somewhere in any other regions?
Uh, Hi, Anurag. Thanks again. Very important question. Let me start. This question actually challenges that, risk and hazard assessment is scientific and quantitative. Since, everything now you just put a question which is more of a qualitative. Now, here I would like to answer your question by giving you instances, and also trying to tell you how can we bring this qualitative assessment into quantity so that it can be numerically expressed. We always try to neglect qualitative assessment. So we need to definitely, it's a very, very important point right now. Rizvi sir also mentioned that AWS and EWS, which is right now, very, very essential. But we also have this term called community-based EWS, which is now involving community, which is very, very important in that sense. First important thing is you are right, Anurag, that the sensors they fail sometimes in the high mountains. It needs a lot of maintenance. The terrain is really harsh. So, maintaining the instruments in those high altitude becomes very tricky. Second thing is, limited coverage of the satellite in terms of, temporal resolution. The time it covers the same region again and again. So we do not have that in a regular basis. So what do we have? No, here, what is important, the question is whether community is important in hazard assessment, and can we bring community in the quantitative assessment of risk? I think it is very doable. First important thing is I would like to give you an incident, examples of very well-known South Lonak disaster. So what happened is that there was the first level, the water, once it was released, there was this ITBP people up in the Janak post, which is just near the lake. They witnessed that the lake levels were, the water levels of the river was rising, and then immediately they could give us signal to the downstream that the water levels here in Janak, which is closer to the lake, is rising. Now this was something which was in early warning system, but it was given by the community, right? It was by the ITBP. And just imagine the number of people we have in the high mountains, very close to these rivers. They can be a very useful source of early warning system. And that is where we say, when we try to bring into science to communities, it needs to be by the people, for the people. So that is always there. So unless we bring communities, take their thought process, as you rightly mentioned, that communities are there at the ground, and science is, we do some modeling sitting in the lab, and then we go once in a while, which is also very, we have to acclimatize for 10 days, and then eventually we are not even able to breathe out there. So the people out there, they are actually the one who has seen from the birth. And as you rightly said, these natural signals, just imagine you and me sitting in the mountains, you being closer to the lake, and then one fine day you come out and you see that the color of the river has changed. So what would you do is, you, as being your friend, you give me a call and you say that, Ashim, this is happening, so let us be aware. Suddenly you see that the birds started, making more noise, and you could see that, things that naturally happen. And then these new smaller changes, as a scientist, will not be able to find out, right, neither through remote sensing nor through any other instruments. And by the time instrument would give us something related to increase in viscosity, increase in sediment load, it is already late. So definitely we have something there. We have people who have seen the ecosystem for a while now. And that is where I would also like to give you one example from Bhutan, where this valley, which is there, and up there is a complex called the Lunana complex. And they have the most hazardous lake in the Himalaya. It's a complex where you have 3-4 lakes, and it was struck by GLOFs several times. So in a recent paper, which we worked with my PhD student, we found out that in the previous GLOFs, what the major source of early warning was through mobile communication. 36% of either relatives of the people who were downstream, or people, they just put text messages, WhatsApp messages, and that is how exposure was minimized. And eventually we could reduce the risk. Right. So there is a hazard sitting out there. Once you have these, the communities here played a very important role. The second important, that is one incident I'm trying to tell you. Second important thing is, when as a science interventions, we try to take instruments up in the mountains, there's always a gap between science and community, right? They don't understand. Sometimes we definitely more of the time, we do not understand their language. It's not about language. I mean to say that communication gap. And the second thing, that when we bring in instruments up there in the mountains, they are also not aware what this instrument is bought for. Is it for their good, or it is for... So we need to bridge that gap, that this is something for good. And, if it is only possible when we try to get their trust, we bring them together. And, in the building process, we build together. Whether it is our modeling results, whether it is the ministry, it is the NDMA, everyone, now with this recent GLOF program, I'm very, very happy that, Sikkim has come up with an example where we take lessons from Sikkim NDMA, SDMA is doing, and how NDMA facilitated that. Taking examples of Sikkim, other states have started doing
So we
this,
are
and
seeing it working, right? So
it
we
is
are seeing
working.
it actually working now.
Yes, and the Sikkim, the expeditions that you've been, if you look into the history of Sikkim expeditions by SSDMA, it is one of the most explored state in terms of glacier hazards, and it has all started in the last few years. Once this glacier lake Glof mitigation program started, it all happened, and it was all lacking. And now that we have seen people involving communities right at the base, not going even up. You start with the community and go up, and as you go up, you try to tell them the stories about why these instruments are bought. And there is a lot of spirituality involved here, and also religious beliefs of glacial lakes. Many of the high mountain people communities, they respect the glacial lakes. They try to see them. So we need to also respect their point of view. And also, communities should come together with us in that sense, first of all.
Thank you.
Yeah, just last one point
Yes,
I
please.
just wanted to make is that, that it is quantitative. If we try to bring in community, take their views, we can all normalize, bring into numerical values of what they have been doing. And in terms of vulnerability, we have definite methods where we can bring into those into numbers. For example, I'd like to give you a couple of more minutes, Anurag. Sorry for,
Go ahead.
So let us say we have a valley where you have 10 households, and we know that from modeling, we know that they're at potential risks. And then what we can do in terms of vulnerability, we just go to their places, and then we try to do a simple survey where we try to bring them, make them aware, and also learn about them, about their facilities. What is the internet service? Are they aware of the news? Do they have elderlies in their home? Do they have what is the education level, sanitation level? With all of that, can we bring down that to numbers of every household? And then you plan a mitigation measure or risk reduction measure where you bring this number into the hazard modeling, saying that okay, this house has point out of 10, it's 5 points. It's more vulnerable. Something has 2. So, in that case, what we are bringing communities, and they also are aware that, okay, there's hazard, there's risk. They would also be happy to be in collaboration with science, and together only it works. Otherwise, it's a failure.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hashim. I think I don't now not required to ask Anthony this question to answer it. So I think you have already covered it. So I think now we have the science, we have the governance gaps, we have the monitoring tools, including communities also themselves, helping with the monitoring, and citizen science engagement is happening. So now the hardest question, like how do we put it all together that's something actually that works for the people who need it most? So here, let's talk about like designing, community-led adaptation frameworks towards the. I'll move now to the final round of this, questions. So we know we have third pole as the largest, fresh water outside the polar regions. A lot of people depend on it. Science is raising alarm. All of this is there. So now question here is, if we were to design a community-centered GLOF adaptation framework that actually works at village level, not as a policy document, Dr. Aparna, what would its non-negotiable building blocks be? What does that framework, where does it really begin, and what makes it truly hold and accountable?
Yeah, so thank you, Anurag, and it's been a really fantastic listening this far. Thank you to all my co-panelists for the great and engrossing interventions. So coming to, I'll keep my answer brief in the interest of time. So, according to me, a community-centered, GLOF adaptation framework at local level, at the level of a village, if it needs to be practical, participatory, and most importantly resilient, Then it needs to have six non-negotiable building blocks, according to me. Again, this may not be the right or the correct this one, but then first one, as Ashim said and emphasized a lot, that a monitoring system which is local in nature, the local monitoring systems, which use simple tools, and which incorporate community observers, that would be first. Then second, early warning mechanisms that reach the largest number of people, almost quickly to each and every household in the village. That would be second. Then third would be evacuation routes and safe shelters, which we know much beforehand, not waiting for something to really strike and then we go looking. So evacuation routes and safe shelters. Then community training and drills are again very important, because that's how people will become more and more prepared for them. That being fourth. Fifth is inclusivity, basically, because it is again very important that and we may know that in such events, the marginalized groups, the elders, the women, they are the most hardly hit. So we have to plan a framework which is inclusive, where the voice of the marginalized groups is heard. They feel acknowledged. And then last, and not the least, the most important one is that a continuous feedback loop, a mechanism wherein feedback can be given to improve this kind of this GLOF adapt. If you're talking about GLOF, then GLOF adaptation framework, but this can be taken up for any mountain hazard framework, adaptation framework. So these are my six suggestions, or you may say non-negotiable building blocks, which I would like to be there in a village level or a local level adaptation framework.
Thank you, Dr. Aparna. So I think let's bring us to almost towards the end of this structured conversation with last question to Rizvi sir here. Sir, most of India's disaster management frameworks, they were designed around earthquakes, cyclones, and floods. But how do we better integrate national disaster management system, local governance institutions, and community actors into a glacier-specific preparedness architecture? Do we need dedicated policy mechanisms, separate from the general disaster framework? Can you elaborate on this national GLOF-related policy that you were mentioning earlier? Can you throw more light on that? What already exists and what still needs to be pushed? And then maybe talk about this Sikkim's Apada program that has been working in the communities there. So over to you, sir.
As regards a Glacier program, so one, we should not expect that there should be a complete institution dedicated to glaciers. There can be, but resources permitting. But how about having centers and cells within institutions which work on glaciers? They're already there. The Central Water Commission looks at water, they look at flowing water, and they look at frozen water. So the Central Water Commission is the best place where a glacial center resides, and I'm sure and I know that they work a lot on this subject. The National Remote Sensing Center's entire disaster management center works on this. And lest the people watching this program think that Government of India doesn't care for glaciers, we should never forget that when the Disaster Management Act was passed in 2005, and then a schedule was made of the nationally recognized disasters. So floods is mentioned in 4 disasters out of these 12. One is flash floods, 2 is urban floods, 3 is riverine floods, and 4 is glacial lake outburst floods. So when GLOFs are mentioned, so GLOFs found their way into the national program even before lightning. So the orientation, the understanding of glacial melt is there in government. Now, what exactly is being done? I told you all about what NDMA has been doing, what state governments have been doing, what SDMA has been doing. And it's not just SDMA. SDMA gets a bit highlighted, but Himachal, J&K, Ladakh, Uttarakhand, and Arunachal Pradesh have also been doing a lot of work on visiting the glaciers along with their academic institutions. The one big thing which I am sure will not come up on this call, which I am raising right now, which is outside the syllabus because you haven't even asked me this question, is that what should other people do? Who are these other people? There are these massive philanthropic foundations within India. I'm not even talking of the ones that come from overseas. So, massive philanthropic foundations that spend 500, 600 crores a year. Only about 2 to 3% is the macro number, goes towards programs on disaster management. And there was a recent number that came out that 30,000 crores is what goes into CSR, of which only 3%, 900 crores, goes into disaster management. On a back of the envelope calculation, of that 900 crores, most of the money goes into capacity building. And if you remember in the beginning, I gave you 5 points: the points of assessment, automated monitoring, early warning, mitigation, capacity building. So capacity building, which has been given about 10% funds from the national program, normally gets 50 to 60 to 70% of programs from the philanthropic side of the budgets, which is again a very small number. This needs to go up. They should stop working. Okay, I should use the word stop. That's a very police-like, hardcore word. But I should say that they should reduce their focus on climate mitigation and doing things like how climate mitigation projects, because a lot of work has already been done there. A lot of effort has to be put onto the adaptation side, especially on these 12 hazards that the government of India has listed. Prominent among those is GLOF. So when the corporate sector side comes in, that's the non-profit side, it'll make a big difference, number one. Number two is the for-profit side. Now, if the government of India and the state governments are expending their mitigation funds on GLOF, then who is getting the contracts to do it? The for-profit companies. No. So the for-profit companies, it took us, Dr. Sattar knows this, Shukla ma'am knows this, Anthony knows this. We were looking around for companies, private companies, any company that would come up with a proof of concept that yes, we can install an AWS with 11 sensors and a working link through the satellite and something that works on -10, -20 degrees or -30 and +10 degrees and stays there. We couldn't find. Why? Because the for-profit sector is also very happy getting that money which it spends on the capacity building part, or maybe doing slightly more work on something which is centric to the large urban centers. The real need is the Himalayas. The real need is where it's more difficult to go. So the one last point I'd like to make in this open session is that we should go for the higher hanging fruit, not for the lower hanging fruit.
Thank you, sir. That's, I think, brings a perfect closure to this discussion. But let's open the floor quickly, to the audience. There are so many questions I'm already seeing here in the chat. So maybe we start one by one. There is a question from Rahul. Would request Dr. Rizvi to throw some light on the mitigation budget, its usage, monitoring on a professional note, and ownership and utilization and surrender of these budget by states, as also dedicated center of excellence for Himalayan states. Rahul is asking this.
Yeah, so Mr. Rahul Jubran, you asked an interesting question as to how much are these funds allocated and all that. So 15th Finance Commission gave 2.25 lakh crores over 5 years. That's 45,000 per year to the whole country. Of that, it was a 30-70 breakup. So 30%, 15,000 stayed with Government of India, and 30,000 per year goes to all the states, which on an average works out to about 700-800 crores per state, the larger ones getting larger. The 16th Finance Commission has raised the 2.25 to 2.83 lakh crores. So that's a fairly significant rise. So obviously every state is going to have independent funds in the 70-30 format, in which 70% of the funds are automatically going to the states. So it's for the states to spend that money. The one that gets surrendered is the national part. So if the national part, that 30%, the proper project is not made in time, and the state is not able to do it in time, the finance ministry is not able to do it in time, then that is something which is not drawn. So that's not really surrendered, it's not drawn. Otherwise, the whole surrender problem of funds is a very large Government of India issue with regard to the finance ministry. I'm definitely not competent to comment, but disaster management funds are only about 1% of all the funds that the Government of India spends. I'd like to also say that I noticed a second question by Mr. Ankit on water pocket outburst floods that I think Anthony could take. And Mr. Mohammed Rafiq is asking on adaptation measures. And then a very interesting question, adaptation measures, maybe Anthony or Dr. Sadar. But one question I'd like to respond to is by Mr. Prashant of APAC. Mr. Prashant of APAC, are you there? Can we see you?
Yes, Professor, I'm here.
Can we see you? Can your video is on? Because you're an important person
Now I
to
think
have
we
said what
can
you said.
turn your videos on if you would like.
Yeah, I
Everyone.
can't see Mr. Prashant. Okay, anyway, so Mr.
Am I
Prashant, I
visible?
just like you're saying that India is already a flaving state where we cannot manage our traffic. So how will we manage it such a massive task like disaster management? So I think all of us, including me, who put 36 years, or Dr. Sattar, who's training so many students, Anurag, who's trying his best to get glaciers to become mainstream, and Anurag was stuck for 72 hours in the glaciers, and we must credit him for the amount of enthusiasm he has. Anthony, who's a young boy of 30, has put his whole life into it. Aparna ma'am and her whole department works on this. We should all like hang up and go home. If India's a flailing state, it's okay, let's go home. So I would say you must be a young man. We should not have a negativist mindset. We should always look at things positively. And you must watch that movie by Sanjay Dutt called Munna Bhai. It was a Munna Bhai movie. What is it called? Something it's called. So in that, there's one basic thing: Lage Raho Munna Bhai. So it's a massive country. There is no country in this world that has 140 crore people, and it is a democracy. So it has to work with democracy. It has to listen to Mr. Prashant and also answer him. And it has to listen to Dr. Sattar, who will say ki funds are not coming towards the glacial mitigation. Why are they going to the landslide side? So you have to listen to everybody, come to a decision. And so it's a slow and steady move in which all of us have to make this mansion brick by brick. So we must have a positive attitude. And I worked for 36 years in the police department, and there are a lot of things to be done which are not being done. I wanted them to be done faster, but whatever else I was able to do, whatever else my colleagues were able to do, I think over 36 years, a huge difference has been made. Otherwise, today you would not have been able to catch those six foreigners who were hanging around in Manipur somewhere and planning anti India activities. So, all of this improvement comes slow and steady. And never forget what IMD did after the 1999 super cyclone in Odisha, 1999. There was no early warning, there was no automated system, there was just nothing. And so many thousands lost their lives. 25 years down the road, the IMD and NRSC and ISRO, they give you 7 days early warning for any earthquake. They give you the cone of uncertainty and they tell you कि in villages में cyclone का peak आएगा. So those people are evacuated by the district magistrates. So all of this is there because there were people like Anthony, Dr. Ashim, Anurag, Aparna ma'am, and maybe myself also, if you include in that list, who were going धीरे धीरे लगे रहो. So Mr. Prashant, please let's talk about this if you want to, but we must have a positive attitude. Now over to you, Anurag.
No, thank you. I was just going through all the questions. If anyone wants to, raise their hand, and Jinit, you have raised your hand.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, my name is Jinit. I work for Outlook magazine as a journalist. So I was just listening to the conversations you guys were having about the media as such. So just want to
Yes,
put
please.
an input here. If any subject gets eyeballs, media will run after it. Okay. That is what I'll say. So coming to a question that I had, I heard Rizvi talking about, of course, there are some difficulties in terms of resources and other things when it comes to working things on the ground. So I just want to understand, if we look at the last, let's say 1 decade as such, and at the pace that these calamities are happening, do you think, Rizvi, that we have the enough resources in terms of logistics and a skillful workforce to look at, those things, comparing with the pace at which the changes are happening? Your thoughts, sir?
So you've got a good point there, that the resources are not enough. They will never be enough, which is why I raised the point about not looking at only government fiscals and state government fiscals, but also looking at non-profits and for-profits who should orient themselves to the task of climate adaptation and disaster mitigation. The other point is that if you have to, like you see many insurance companies, international ones, they come out with these numbers that 10 years, 300 billion has been lost, 400 billion has been lost. It's a very nebulous thing to do that kind of an assessment. So then to say if 300 billion has been lost, we need $300 billion, let's go looking for 300 billion. That's not a very practical way of doing things. We have seen how so many $1 trillion were coming for climate mitigation and climate adaptation from an international quorum. For the last 6 years, all the COPs have been looking at it. But at the end of the day, nothing came because nobody has the money to just give out like that. So everything will be on self-interest. India has its self-interest. We have to inure ourselves. So the 15th Finance Commission 5 years ago moved us away from just spending money on relief. We used to spend 65,000 crores over 5 years till the 14th Finance Commission. And then it took you to 3x, the 15th Finance Commission, and then it cut it into 4 windows. So it brought just the expense on response and relief to a small window of 40%. 60% went to pre-disaster and long-term recovery. So all these slow and steady changes that have been brought about in the quality of spending and also in the increasing the absolute amount of spending on the government side. Now what I'm saying is that the government side cannot give more than 1% of its budget. It's already giving 1% today. Out of the 50 lakh crores, if you have about 50, 60,000 crores a year going for disaster management, that's 1%. You have to put away education, defense, various other things. So the government has possibly reached its limit of the amount of funds it can provide. Hence, the non-profits and the for-profits need to chip in. And secondly, the government needs to start focusing its expenditure in directions where the maximum impact will be got. Like mitigation, we didn't get a chance to discuss GLOF mitigation measures, but states are now looking at actually siphoning off water, actually building slightly stronger moraine dams lower down the stream, retention structures which are actually flow through. They're not dams, but they're just flow through retention structures like causeways to break the speed of the GLOF. A lot of studies have been done and a lot of interest is being shown. In fact, CWC is actually looking at one such project. So that's the overall response I'd like to give.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question. I think it was Ashim ji who were discussing about the role of communities in terms of mitigation and of course looking at their traditional means to maybe combat or predict if there's any calamity as such. So in today's time, if any of the speakers here can just highlight some things on how communities by themselves can of course mitigate and work before any hazardous or any calamity comes in. How does that? How can they do that?
Okay. Can I answer that if other panelists agree? Jinit, thank you for the question. Communities, when we talk about earthquakes, we already know which, I'm sure all of us know which zone are we there at earthquake hazard, right? So do we have anything on glacier related hazards that tells us that at this point, where am I standing or, my location at that point gives you what hazard zone you are at act. So that is the scientific intervention I'm talking about. But this scientific intervention, this scientific knowledge, needs to first go to the communities, so that the communities are first aware of the fact that they are in certain zone which is moderate, high, low hazard, right? So first thing is that science needs to be communicated. Once they are aware that they are in a zone which is of high GLOF hazard, so now the point is that you need to have certain awareness programs. For example, from our childhood, from our school, all of us has gone through drills which helps us evacuate in an earthquake situation, evacuate in a fire situation. But we do not have drills when we have, how do we have to react in a glove situation? And it is not required for the entire country. It is just required for the people in the mountains. So can we have programs where communities know the science, they know where they belong to, where they are located, which hazard zone they are, and how they have to prepare themselves and react in terms of such calamities or such signals that nature gives them, and without wasting any time, they take the proper actions at the right time. Unless you tell them what to do, how to behave, and how to react, it will be a panicky situation. Normally, everyone panics in such situations. So that panic situation gets reduced once awareness comes into play. Once they know what science has told them, and now it is the part of the community that has to take the science and bring their own ways of facing it, the ways of teaching their communities. Maybe educated people in the society can actually go tell the people who are their elderly, tell them how to react. Maybe in schools you can have such programs where you are taught about glove evacuation plans, what you need to keep ready in terms of emergency situation. All that sort of things needs to be given to them so that they can react, and community here can only help, because post disaster is what is done by it is actually when the disaster is already stuck. So we can reduce the exposure by the effort of the community itself.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Rashid.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just a second to all the speakers. If you're looking at the chats, any questions would you like to take up? If I start reading, that might take more time. So any questions that you would like to take up?
So I can see a question by
So this
Chandra
this question on adaptation measures, if maybe Anthony could tell us about which adaptation measures have been tried. The one that came from Mr. Rafiq of Niti Aayog.
Yeah, hi. So currently, more than the adaptation measures like the NGRMP program, the National Glove Risk Mitigation Program, have mostly worked on the identification of mitigation measures. So again, mitigation measures are classified into two: structural mitigation measures and the non-structural mitigation measures. So within the structural mitigation measures, as how Rasvi sir already mentioned, we are having the mechanisms of lake lowering, artificial lake lowering, where the high levels of lake will be lowered during the lean flow season, so that like maybe using a pump or the siphoning method. So that's one criteria. And the second criteria is again flow through retention tanks, where towards the downstream, in the upstream where around 3-4 lakes, the dangerous glacial lakes are there will be a retention structure where a minimum amount of flow through will always be allowed, so that the water in the river always maintains. But the extra water which gets into the glacial, which gets into the reservoir, gets stored so that there is no high discharge in the downstream. And when it comes to the non-structural mitigation measures, again, there are technical interventions and the policy documentation part. So on the technical interventions, again, the instrumentations like installation of EWS, and the development of hydrological models within the basins on what-if scenarios, like preparation of inundation libraries, getting into a dashboard so that it becomes that science communication becomes much more easier in that case. And when it comes to the policy documentation, it's more on how to build the capacity in the community on identifying a risk, or maybe reacting to a early warning, how one should act upon. So, and then comes the standard operating procedures mock drill. So generally that is the bigger umbrella on like how the mitigation program has been planned. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just come in? This is Dr. Rafiq from Niti Aayog. So actually, I just wanted to know as we have this national adaptation plan working on, and we are working on various sectors, and the NAP will be released soon by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And being MOES and NDMA is also a part of that national adaptation plan. And we have seen many SAP CCs from Uttarakhand, from like Jammu Kashmir is making its first SAP CC, but from SKIM and other we have those SAP CCs, but I have not seen anywhere the adaptation angle of view. Say, for example, we know that small glaciers will be vanishing very soon, and how those floods and gulfs are occurring. But I'm talking about the entire the balance of this water system. This is not only used for drinking purposes; it's for agriculture, and so many sectors are actually related to it. Maybe disaster. If we talk about forest, if we talk about agriculture and anything, if we talk about those. Particularly Himalayan states. So this is interconnected with all those sectors. But is there any plan from MOES or NDMA for the long-term adaptation? Say, for example, artificial glaciers or how to retain those glaciers. I'm not talking about those disaster only, the Gulf or landslide, lake outbursts, floods, or this. But how are we sustaining our cryosphere? What is government planning, and is there any finance for that, or we are having like are there any plans for that? That was actually my question, not the mitigation and
I think Aparna ma'am could take that.
Yeah, so Rafiq, there are, some, ideas on that, but, you must be aware of ice stupas in Ladakh. But I don't think that they have been taken forward to that extent. And there are also, talks about, shielding the glaciers from melting. But, these plans have not been, because there are pros and cons of these plans. Because if you may be knowing that, covering what is proposed for basically
Mhm.
is coming from basically the debris covered glaciers. You may be knowing that
Mhm.
when debris
Mhm.
covers the glacier, then it kind of slows down its melting process. So taking cue from that, there are in some parts of the world, some work is being done where some kind of material is being put on top of the glaciers to slow down the melting. But then it is not that easy, because as you said, that what is the water which is coming down from that melting of the glaciers is being used for multiple purposes, and most of them, importantly, it is being used for as a drinking water and by the communities. So what is the safest material that we can put on top? And so things are going on, but I don't think that that government level program has been adopted for this, because it is not a very simple exercise. But yes, there are thoughts in this direction as well. But as I think Ashim also said, that this is part of a larger geological cycle also, that is also something which we have to consider. So that is my take on that.
So, ma'am, I think you remember me. I was your student also.
I do
So,
remember.
yes,
Why
ma'am.
not?
So actually, I came to know from a post like I'm recently I have joined Niti Aayog. I was working with MOFCC before, and here at Niti Aayog we are planning to have some modeling and adaptation capacities. And one of the theme is water. And when I was reviewing the documents, the SAPCCs and everything, being a person from the mountain perspective, I have not seen much for the glaciers and all. They are talking about agriculture even for the endemic species and all, but nothing is there much. And at Niti Aayog, I'm pushing for this work group on the Himalayas, which is already there, but there are no adaptation measures, no finance is there, which we have to route. So in that case, I think I should reach out to you, ma'am, and some persons from NDMA and some other Center for Excellences, and we can together form a work group and see how this adaptation measures for this
And go
can be
forward.
done.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
So thank you, Rafiq, and you're at the right position now to push the agenda. And good to see you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you're a teacher now, so we have two teachers on this call, Dr. Sattar and Aparna ma'am. I didn't know you were a teacher, you're a professor.
Yes, sir, I was at the ministry at the University of Kashmir. That was a teaching stint I had for almost 3 years. So that's how know Rafi.
Double respect for you.
Yeah, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Teaching in
Thank
this
you, ma'am. We'll be in touch, and I'll be.
Sorry for bringing in one little quip, but teaching in this age of AI is very difficult. Because every student is checking what the professor is saying is the right one.
I don't know.
Actually, our teaching was kind of experimental and field-based things. So we visited a lot of glaciers, and we're working on those gloves
Anurag,
and
there
all.
are two very interesting questions by Mr. Dorji and Mr. Vanchuk. So, yeah, so maybe, I don't know, Ms. Dr. Sattar could look at those because they are asking that what about the neighboring states? We might do our disaster management. What about our 4, 5 neighboring states? What are they doing about the transboundary issue? And then what is the international availability of work? And is there a cooperation? Is there a council that MOES is part of? So maybe two parts to that question. So Dr. Sattar, I guess, could take that first.
Yes, I think the question is from Tandin. Okay, thank you, Tandin. Thank you, Rizvi sir, for putting this question. Again, a very tough question. First thing is I will be talking about the importance of transboundary hazards and risk that is involved, which is very, very important at this moment and also has been important from the time glacial lakes started forming cross boundaries. So if we look into India, we have been surrounded, we share our borders with several countries, and especially there are a lot of glacial lakes which are beyond, it's not only just glacial lakes I'm talking about. There are glaciers which are also beyond boundaries. They store glacier water. So there is two questions here. One is the hazard, which is the short-term hazard. When I'm talking about the risk, which is short-term risk, one is the long-term risk, which is transboundary in nature. The short-term risk would include those things which can originate in a different country and can have the impact on a different country in a very short span of time, say in a day or in few hours of time. That can be, say, a glacial lake outburst flood. Where in case of water security, we have definitely these, water treaties, the Indus Water Treaty, we have the Ganga Water Treaty. So these water treaty also quantify the glacier stored water, which is very important because they share the fresh water. And in terms of policy, there needs to be transboundary policies that look into these matters, where hazard is in some different country and can have impact in a different country. All needs to be bi-directional or multi-directional approach among countries which are together. Maybe UNDP is doing such programs. I'm not aware of that, but I'm sure, being an international organization which takes care of broader problems, these are taken care of. But again, as individual scientists, we are looking into such matters where we have seen transboundary hazard in case of India, and we have been evaluating in downstream risk it can happen. It can bring to India, especially in the hydropower sector. We see that since from what we've witnessed from South Lonak, that these cascades can impact hydropowers, and these hydropowers are very close to national borders, and an impact which can come from a different country, and we're not aware of such cases, can lead to such cascading impacts, even though it can be possible that the volume of the lakes are much more higher than what is the volume of the reservoir. But even then, that can lead to such cascades. So we must be very careful in terms of evaluating policies. I'm sure our governments are doing their best in framing these policies, and we are towards it with the efforts that we have been seeing. Yeah. With the efforts that we've been seeing, this has come into light only from a few years, as Rizvi sir also pointed out. And from the GLOF mitigation program and other disaster management programs that NDMA is leading right now in the country, we are going towards it. it's always better to have something than nothing. We have now a lot to learn from and to go ahead. So with that, I think we are going towards it, and I think one find it as it takes time. Rightly pointed out, it doesn't happen just in a blink of an eye. It just needs time so that everyone is on the same page. And that also, when it comes to transboundary hazard, it's not just the community of our own country. We have to bring in a larger community. That also might take more little time, more debates, and that is a part of this. And eventually, we all have to come to a single page.
Yeah, so just adding to what Ashim has said and related to the transboundary issue and how India is, kind of what initiative India is taking in this regard. So just to inform that under the BIMSTEC umbrella, that is the Bay of Bengal initiative for multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation, which is a multilateral initiative, and where Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bhutan, India and Nepal are part of it, BIMSTEC, group. So there, we are in the process of forming a BIMSTEC Himalayan Science Council, because Himalayas is a shared region which kind of impacts in one way or the other all the BIMSTEC countries. And we have a very successful example of BIMSTEC Weather and Climate Center, which MOS and India actually leads, and we give weather and climate advisories to the BIMSTEC countries. On the same pattern, we are going ahead to basically lead another initiative, that is the BIMSTEC Himalayan Science Council, which would, I think, take care of the said issues.
Thank you, Dr. Aparna. I think we are about time. Unless if there are any more questions you would like to address, and if speakers have a little more extra time, then we can answer. Some more questions.
I see Bhanu from NCPOR.
Yeah, Bhanu sir. Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot.
Hello.
Please.
Hello, myself, Bhanu Pratap. I am from NCPR. So I'm a glacier scientist. I do work on a glacier, and I do mountaineering as well. So glacier, I feel like is a fascinating body. So I love to go to the glacier. That's the one. But on a positive side, actually, Globe, not especially Globe, lakes, I feel they are very majestic. Why? Because I'm working on the glacier. That glaciers are melting, but it gives me the relief that the water is still there. So those lake, the depression which has been created by the glacier, the water is still there. I was doing some of the study, especially those lake terminating glaciers, where so definitely there will be a lake, pro-glacier lake, which is ever expanding, and those are under the category of risk for the whole Himalaya. So when I was working on the Western Himalayan side, what we have found, the glacier which has lost its ice since 1962. Out of the 100% of ice that has been lost, it is preserved, almost 50% of that water is preserved in the water form. That is in the form of lake. So again, we have seen that, especially in the Western Himalaya, which is arid region, when in winter there is everything is locked. But because of the lake has formed recently, lake has formed in a big volume, so the water is always regulated. So how we can communicate to the locals, because in a daily basis they feel that okay, water is there, tourism is also increasing in that area. So and suddenly we are going to them and making a fear factor that love, you are sitting in a ticking bomb. So because recently, I think 10 days back, I was in Himachal doing workshop, educating the locals, and they actually not imagining those things, because since the water is regulating, reaching to them, they are imagining those things that it gives us the benefit. So it is always wonderful to hear that Rizvi sir, this question is to you, sir. So how we can do that, because scientists it's difficult to communicate.
Oh, no, come on. I've learned so much from scientists. I've learned so much. And NCPR is such a lovely organization. Despite looking at oceans, you started looking at this end of the country and all the ice and a lot of work your organization has done. Basically, your point is about panic. That if you do warn people about gloves, then don't create panic. And if you don't want people about Gloff, then they will not panic when the actual Gloff happens. So the nuance is in the kind of community building that you do, the kind of community participation that you do when an early warning system is installed. As Dr. Sattar had said, when the color of the water changes, I believe when there is a Gloff, there is a very foul smell that comes out in the atmosphere. Then people in Sikkim said that there was a massive shaking of the ground. It was as if an earthquake was coming, but it was different. So there are all these little things that need to be looked at. And at the end of the day, it is the trainer on the ground who is interacting with the village community of those small communities that live on the river valley. It is eventually how best we are able to orient them. That is what will go to the people. Uh, so that is what I would like to say. But as a government of India, it's difficult to, nuance this very difficult type of task. The best I think we can do in state governments and in districts, the district authorities is to train their capacity कि panic नहीं फैलाओ. So normally in the police यही होता है कि if there is a problem, don't spread panic, but do control. So it's a balance that every lower down official must have. That is, I guess, the way we can respond to that.
Just I'd like to, Bhanu, I'd just like to add a simple point what Rizvi sir also just a point that, even if there is a lake, as we all know that all lakes are not dangerous. NDMA has already come up with the list of lakes, every state, Himalayan state, which are potentially dangerous. Now we know that, we have a set of lakes which are potentially dangerous, but there is also a fact that we have seen incidents that is the Gloff has happened from somewhere which we never expected. For example, a supraglacial lake. Supraglacial lake where there's a lake, there's a water which started forming because of differential melting on top of the glacier, and suddenly there's a seepage in the glacier, and glacially or subglacially it drains off. That is what we have seen in recent Rasua floods that caused transboundary impacts. Second important I would like to point out here is that even if there is a lake up there which might look tiny to you, small lakes. I published an article saying that small lakes should not be ignored. The point is that the size of the lake doesn't determine its hazard potential, but its surrounding does. What sort of an environment it is located? Is it exposed to such mass movements? So if you look into 2016 event, that there's an event that happened in China that is from a very small lake which is called the Gongba Tongsha Lake, and that whole valley had a history of Gloff event from another lake which was called the Sirenmaku Lake, which was 10 maybe 40 times bigger than the 2016 event. But that 16 event caused the same magnitude Gloff of what that 16 times bigger lake has caused. So comparing this is becoming very tricky and needs a lot of scientific interventions and also look into that. But the criteria that NDMA has used and SDMAs are looking at, that actually is pointed out the topmost priority lakes. And apart from that, I think the next phases, I think would definitely Rizvi sir would have more idea of taking other lakes also into account so that we have a better hazard situation up there in the mountains.
Thank you, Dr. Ashim. Any other questions left unanswered? There is one from Varsha. Varsha, are you still here? Varsha was our speaker in the last Glacier dialogue. Varsha, आप हो अभी?
हाँ जी अनुराग, हेलो.
Hi. Very relevant question you should ask.
एक्चुअली यहाँ तो मैंने जो पॉइंट किया, अभी डॉक्टर सत्तार ने बहुत सारे ऐसे पॉइंट्स बताए जो बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट थे, जो कम्युनिकेशन सिस्टम को हम कैसे बिल्टअप कर सकते हैं, चाहे वो साइंटिस्ट हो, गवर्नमेंट हो, डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हो और कम्युनिटीज़ हो. तो वो एक बहुत बड़ी ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि मैंने उत्तराखंड से एक रिपोर्ट की और ग्लेशियर लेक आउटबर्स्ट को लेकर ही मैं कम्युनिटी के बीच गई थी, तो जो जानकारियाँ मुझे वहाँ से मिली. और जो दूसरी एक जो बात मैंने अभी अपने कमेंट में लिखी है कि कोई एक ऐसा स्ट्रक्चर, एक ऐसी बॉडी एक होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि जिम्मेदारी किसकी है, कौन से डिपार्टमेंट की है, डिस्ट्रिक्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट, एनडीएमए, एसडीएमए, और बहुत सारे स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं। तो अगर कुछ इफेक्टिव ऑन द ग्राउंड आपको करना है तो एक ऐसी गवर्निंग बॉडी कुछ होना चाहिए जिसके जरिए आप काम कर सके, जो कि अभी नहीं है। इसलिए कभी जो कोई ट्रेनिंग हो भी जाती होंगी उसका कोई असर ही नहीं होता है, क्योंकि वो एक उसका कुछ मॉनिटरिंग, इवेल्युएशन या एक हैंड होल्डिंग लॉन्ग टर्म में वो नहीं दिखाई दी मुझे। यही मेरा कमेंट भी था जी।
Anyone who would like to answer?
Are you looking at me?
I think आप भी दिख रहे हो कैमरे।
Everyone is
All
looking
the
at
tough
you.
questions goes to Rizvi sir.
So ma'am, point is कि there comes a time where you create a lot of, see, it's for governments also, it's very easy to create an organization. It's very easy to create a law. It sounds very difficult, but it's much easier to create the law and create the organization. It's way more difficult to actually do the coordination required to run that organization. So already the Disaster Management Act is the law that we have. Already the NDMA has been created for policy and the think tank part, and NIDM for the training part, and NDRF for the response part. So already these three institutions are there. At NDMA, we've created this coder institution. There is a coder for landslides, coder for earthquake, coder for glove, where all these institutions, where do you think I met Dr. Ashim Sattar? Where do you think I met Aparna ma'am? It was all because we started reaching out to the organizations and the organization started reaching out to us. So anybody who needed anything, which is the states, they knew that, okay, well, let's ask these guys. They know where will I find a good scientist to do my hazard assessment. So that organization exists. It may not be there in very much in the public domain, advertised properly, because there's nobody who's got time to do all that. But the government people, the people who are in the know, the district magistrates, the SPs, they are all well aware. So इसमें मैम टेंशन नहीं होना चाहिए कि there is no body, there is a body. It's just that how much coordination are we doing and how quickly we are doing it. That should definitely be a scope where people who are not in government should keep a close watch and keep reminding us all the time. Anthony, you worked in the government and you're a private guy, so let's see you give us a balanced view.
Yeah, hi. So yes, I guess that system for communication and information dissemination is very clear. Even for the common alerting protocol or making a decision or even the expenditure of a particular mitigation fund from the NDMA to SDMA to DDMAs. But again, the coordination is something which is very important in this case where we are not exactly sure if that's particularly happening. So what I understand is again with the community participation, community should not be just identified as beneficiaries. They should be looked up as participators in informed decision making. Because in many cases, what we have observed is even after the early warning, the evacuation of that particular area, which may be vulnerable to the hazard, did not happen because of mostly three factors. One is no understanding of the early warning. The other one is no trust on the early warning. And the third is no action acted upon. And the second one is the most important, where no trust was built. So that is something what the capacity building at the local level, maybe at a district level or a village level, will actually be important in this case, where the community is also a contributor to the informed decision making and also receiving, which actually builds upon the trust. So I think, yeah, that would be my take here.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Rizvi sir. There is a question from Ankit sir. NDMA with other institutions, including NRSC, have identified lakes which are more susceptible to GLOF. My question is, have NDMA and other institutions have considered the possibility of glacier water pockets? These water pocket outburst floods, WPOF, are more risky compared to those lakes? Does NDMA is working on identifying such water pockets?
Anthony, if you want to take that, or Aparna ma'am, or
Yeah, so in the current program, in the NGRMP program, the water pockets, outburst flows, floods have not been included. So most of the mitigation programs from NDMA actually works in phases. So phase one do address few things. Phase two would have like more coverage. Phase three will have an upscaling. So maybe in the later stages, I think it will be very important to cover the topics. But as of now, in this program, they have not been covered. But yes, that's a concern. We totally agree with that.
Thank you. I think with that, let's close this dialogue. If we can have all the speakers here, and I would love to uh, just thank you, all of you. I mean, we are already 20 minutes late. If I start giving proper closing remarks, that might take some time. But just want to thank you, each one of you, for taking out time and this afternoon to bringing glaciers into the climate conversation and sharing all these wonderful insights and taking head on these difficult questions and just supporting, the work, listening to the communities, listening to everyone. So very, very grateful for this time. And what we will do now, we will in next 2 to 3 days, in 72 hours, as my lucky number 72, we will come back with the insights captured from this session. We'll send it across to each one of them, each one of the participants, and we'll also announce the next Glacier Dialogue that will move beyond science and data, where we want to talk about connecting glaciers through memory, through art, through storytelling. So will very different session, but that will also be great for many of you to come and participate, so that you are able to also start connecting with glaciers just beyond science and beyond data, and the role it has been playing in our day-to-day lives from thousands and thousands of years. So with that, I'll quickly thank everyone. Though I had one question prepared, which may be in one line. If you can quickly ask, if I can quickly ask each one of you in one word or like a short sentence, if you were designing a 10-year roadmap for glacier resilience in Himalayas, you know, what is that single most step we should begin today? Only one answer each one of you has to give. What is that single most one thing, one step we must begin now?
Yeah, Anurag, I'll break the ice this time.
Thank you.
So it's very important, basically, and we've been talking about it also, that there is this gap we see, and between what science knows and what policy is acting on, basically. So in my view, if we can, anything we can start today is that we can try to look for a mechanism or maybe dedicated units which can basically work on this, the cutting edge research or scientific knowledge in the mountain research, and how it can be transformed into simple language, or a kind of a policy briefs for the local government, so that they can know better how they can and where they can incorporate these. So that is something I think we can start with today.
We hope to continue doing some of that work as a foundation. So look forward to your guidance on that.
So my one point is that government of India forms possibly 0.5% or 0.25% of the number of people, responsible people in this country. There must be at least 1 crore, 2 crore more people. They all belong to the non-profits and the for-profits. I would think bringing them all together in this entire exercise of climate adaptation is very important.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my take here would be definitely lining up with what Aparna ma'am and Rizvi sir said. And I would just put 3 words that is last mile communication. We can communicate to the last mile up to where Glacier is getting having an impact. If we can communicate till there, and if they are aware, we are all safe.
Thank you, Dr. Ashim. Last mile communication, Anthony.
Yeah, so the three entities, science, governance, and community, the gap should be bridged properly. Between the science and governance, there should be a model which works in, and there is a policy making which should go in. And between governance and the community, there should be an institutionalized mechanism for the community to report back and for the community to actually trust upon the early warning systems. And between the science and community, which is the most important, I would say, there should be proper science communication.
To
So I
bridge
think,
the gap between science, governance, and communities.
yeah, yes.
That's what we intend to do, and with everyone's guidance and blessings here. So thank you so much once again to all the panelists and to all of you as participants who have joined from many countries. And so I really appreciate it. And thank you once again, and wishing you all a very happy Glacier Day on 21st March and a happy Water Day on 22nd of March. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anurag. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.